Good afternoon. Welcome. I've just been given a countdown to do some work, and I've never had that before. Is this something we can bring into universities and countdown to your lecture? Fabulous. Hello, everybody. I'm Luke Millard. I'm Dean of Teaching and Learning at Abertay University, and we're here to talk to you today about a collaborative cluster project around personalised approaches to resilience and community, which has at its core diagnostic testing and how we might utilise it, and perhaps how we might rename it, and how we might persuade people to engage with it. Could I have the first slide, please? So what we're going to try to do today is continue the theme of the first day, and the first day was about conversations. And so today we're hopefully going to have a conversation with you, and you're going to help guide us on our merry journey through this collaborative cluster. Because this is not perfect, right? We have not solved this. We are in the process of solving it and in the process of learning from it in a variety of different ways. And I think that's the key. What we're going to outline today are the variety of ways in which we've addressed the issue within our different institutions. So you have myself from Abertay and Andrea Cameron from Abertay, who's staffing the online question piece. So our online viewers, you are very welcome. Any questions, please post them, and Andrea will intervene with the people who are talking at that particular time. Our slides seem to have vanished. I don't know if we can bring that. Thank you. So we've got Andrea and myself. We have Maggie Gibson from Birmingham City University, Heather Fotheringham from University of the Highlands and Islands, Colin Milligan from Glasgow Caledonian, and Pauline Bremner from Robert Gordon. There's a few other universities there as well, yeah, because they come in and they go out, and that's fine. You've come in, you've dipped your toe in the water, you thought, not for me yet, okay, or actually I'm going to come in and we're going to embrace it and see how we can move forward. And I think that's part of the refreshing piece here from our perspective, was that we've had people who've utilised it in different ways and actually challenged us about what we think we might mean by diagnostic testing and how it might be utilised. Can I have the next slide, please? So what we're going to do today is you've got about 9 minutes 45 seconds of me, because I've timed it this morning, giving you a brief introduction as to what we're doing. We're going to be drawing on some of the discussions we've had as a group around what's the purpose of what we're trying to do. What are potentially the strengths and weaknesses, and some of the early evidence of what's happened and the ways in which we've implemented it within our particular universities, and some of those products that we think we need to generate to engage the skeptics, as we said. What do you need within your individual institutions to take the conversation forward in this space? So you're going to get some examples from Abertay, from Birmingham City, from the University of Highlands and Islands. Unfortunately, we won't be getting the input from Warwick at this point because Holly's unable to join us, but hopefully as we move forward in the coming year, Holly will be able to share what's going on in Warwick, which is interesting because again they're looking at it a slightly different way. They're looking at it from a postgraduate perspective, how you might utilise it in a postgraduate sphere. And then we're going to have this is a workshop, so we're going to let you do a little bit of work and help us. We're going to have a conversation on what might be the potential for you in terms of diagnostic and how could we best support that. Okay, so hopefully that's what you expected, the type of thing you expected from today, because that's what's going to happen. Next slide, please. So, why are we doing this? Well, we've all been through a strange period over the last couple of years, and when we wrote the bid to QAA, we were really worried about what was going to be happening to the generation of students who were coming into our university. And we didn't think we could treat them we thought we couldn't treat them in the same way we may have treated previous cohorts, because they didn't have the measures, they hadn't had the same experiences. The students who were coming to us over the next couple of years will have missed out on the community elements, the socialisation pieces, all sorts of other elements. So we thought, well, perhaps we need to look at these students in a different way slightly, but also it might be, if we could utilise some sort of testing to assure themselves and ourselves of where their strengths and weaknesses are, then actually that might be something that's better for the long term as well. Actually, we look at how we might better personalise that experience for students. Clearly, institutions have different imperatives in this space. Abate, we wanted to really focus on the retention element. Other people were interested in more at the graduate outcomes side of things. I say there's other people looking at in terms of induction into university and postgraduate levels, etc. So lots of different ways in which people might look at it and think about it. From our perspective, we're all similar types of universities in a way, in that we believe in our students. Yeah? And therefore we have a moral imperative. We've let students into our courses. We've set the admissions criteria. So how are we going to make sure or enable them to be successful at university? And so again, how can we better understand those students? Look at that personalisation of that student learning journey. So when they come in, they understand their strengths and weaknesses, we understand their strengths and weaknesses, and perhaps we can look at things like adaptive learning. Challenging those who need to be challenged, supporting those who need. We just had been at a different workshop around equity. Absolutely. How can we give that leg up? A couple of the universities involved had been involved in the Learning Gain pilots in England. And that Learning Gain legacy is also something of interest to us. So how do we show students and explain to students how they're progressing, how they're developing individually? Could we utilise a repetitive diagnostics to clearly demonstrate to students how they're progressing? Is that worthwhile? But also technology as well, we felt was advancing, and we hoped that there would be miraculous new technologies come which would make this instantaneous and enjoyable, and clearly there's some elements of that which are true as well. Could I have the next slide, please? So as we were doing this, we were also obviously starting to think about what the fundamental things that are underpinning what we're trying to do. There's been brilliant work in the sector, standing on the shoulders of giants and all that. Some great work. So, Alf Lizio, fantastic work, talks about the sense of capability, the sense of purpose, the resourcefulness of students, that connectedness. Actually, all those bits and pieces there are really about understanding how a student is prepared for being at university. And we felt we could reflect that actually within some sort of diagnostic element if we were looking at giving us that snapshot when the student is thinking about coming to a university. Actually, we could look at these areas. We also want to look at it from different perspectives. So the What Works stuff from Liz Thomas, fabulous piece of work. But what it's basically said to us was, if you're going to do anything that wants to effectively engage students, it has to be within the curriculum. So how do we embed this within curriculum? Or do we see it as an added on piece? And again, some universities within this collective have been able to embed it within curriculum, so that actually they're credit bearing and students feel like it resonates in that space. Other people have done it in a slightly different way. And how do you sell that? And we've heard examples of that this morning. I had a very good talk just recently from Aberdeen, who are looking at a sort of a resilience small course again. So there's lots of different ways about doing it. But also there's some pieces here around how might looking at a diagnostic approach impact upon the processes of a university. There's a really nice piece of work here by a lady called Tia McNair in the States. Talks about how do you design your university to become a student-ready college, rather than all those bits and pieces, those hurdles we make students jump in those first few weeks as they're entering university, and that first year of curriculum. How do we make our students automatically supportive for our students and enabling them to succeed? So what might we find from utilising a diagnostic that would inform that conversation? And then finally, there's a lovely piece of work by Leo Lambert and Peter Felton about relationship-rich education, which talks obviously about how do we help students connect with each other and connect with staff and connect with peers, but also talks about, there's a lovely phrase, they talk about the relentless welcome. How do we, every year, prepare our students to succeed at university? And again, there was a marvellous talk in this very room, actually, yesterday about direct entrance and how we support direct entrance into university. That relentless welcome piece, I think is key. And again, how might we utilise that diagnostic piece to perhaps support students in that space? Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So, as a group, we've decided that we've identified this purpose, which is on the screen. Because actually, we think there's an opportunity here for students, probably in their first time in their educational journey is to actually reflect on where they are. Reflect on they wouldn't have been able had that opportunity probably within their hires or their A-levels or their college courses to actually reflect on who they are, where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are. So we think there's a potential for that through utilisation of these tools, but also then to see how that aligns with those institutional priorities, the context of each institution, whether that be around retention, EDI, attainment gaps, etc. Next slide, please. So we've done some initial work, and on the QAA website, there's some initial thoughts. There's a terrible video from myself, but there's some interesting papers on there looking at what a diagnostic approach might look like in terms of that personalisation of the student experience at a macro, at a meso, and at a micro level. So macro, obviously, in terms of organisational development and improvement. How might a diagnostic approach support that? At a meso level through schools, faculties, departments, and at that micro level through the individual student or the module or the programme. Again, some challenges for us as we were thinking, and as we ran a seminar with 140 people from around the world actually on this topic, looking at what are the things we need to unpick if we're going to really venture down this road, and what are some of those challenges that we're going to face, and you'll hear from some colleagues very shortly about some of those challenges. Okay, so next slide, please. So I'm now going to hand over to Maggie, who's going to tell you about how we've started to implement this at one of the universities.
Thank you, Luke. Hi, everyone. I'm head of learner development at Birmingham City University, which means I look after the central learning development team, and I also look after our digital assessment team. So quite a broad remit, and that has sort of directed my interest in this subject. We started looking at this 3 or 4 years ago, actually, so before the pandemic. We had a look around to see if there was anything that we could use, a tool we could use with our students. We couldn't find anything on the market. So we decided to create something ourselves. It's constantly in development. As a result of that, we're constantly tweaking it, changing it, looking at how it works, which I think is a good thing. So the model we came up with should be on the slide. That one? No, not that one. One before that. That one. So you can see our model on the left. It's got 2 elements to it, two sides to it. One is the cohort and course side of things, and the other is the individual student development side of things. Both interconnected, but we focus on the 2 as 2 separate things as well. So the course and cohort side of things is designed to help course teams identify who their students are, find out a bit about who they are as they come into university. So we use this towards the start of the academic journey. So we're looking at finding out what the students' competencies are, also looking at what their areas for development are. So what are their development needs as they're coming into university, in order to put into place some relevant teaching, appropriate teaching, right at the start of their course. So on the other side, we've got the student, the individual student, and we're looking at developing their awareness of their own skills and their own development needs. And we're looking at encouraging them to reflect on their current practices as they go into university and introduce them maybe to some other ideas as well. And we also want to get a sense of their expectations of university. So we don't call this a test, we don't call it a diagnostic, we call it a steps to success tool, and we don't provide any kind of marking or ranking to students or staff about this. It's purely about strengths and areas for development. So, we've gone on to the next slide. So it's a digital tool. We wanted something that was not time consuming to deliver, not labour intensive to deliver, so we went for online. It's multiple choice, so it's automatically marked, and it takes about 30 to 40 minutes for the student to complete it. We've got 2 types of question. One is sort of competency focused, so we're looking at what skills students have as they come in, whether they are going to need some development, And we've also got some self-reflective questions where we're asking them about their confidence and how they feel about coming into university, where they feel their gaps in knowledge may be, where they need a bit of a boost. And I'll read these out because I can't remember them. The areas that we look at are studying at university, academic writing, referencing, reading and understanding texts, numeracy, digital literacy and well-being. And we pack those all into that 30 to 40 minutes. And at the end of it all, the student submits that and they get an automatically generated but personalised report sent through email to them. And that identifies 3 areas of strength. So we're really trying to work with their confidence to tell them that, yes, they are right to be at university, you know, they are capable, it's great that they're there, but also to identify 3 areas where they might like to focus working on developing. So that's provided by email. We also give them some signposting to university services and resources so they can start working on things straight away. We send them to our online transition course so they can access that straight away and start working on those skills straight away. And then we also create a report for the staff as well. So if it's a cohort that's taking it, we will create a summary report for the member of staff of that cohort to summarise the strengths of their cohort, but also where their development needs are. And we provide them with an action plan to go about that. So our main observations are around confidence. So students, regardless of how competent they are, they feel a lack of confidence in their writing and in their numeracy in particular. And also we notice that their digital skills, we can't assume they've got all the digital skills that they need coming into university, so we need to be aware that they've got patchy skills in that area. And lastly, we send a lot of students in the direction of our wellbeing services. It's amazing how many we actually send. So that's good for us, that's good for them, they're getting that straight away as they come in. So we've worked with a number of different courses: psychology, education, media, engineering and computing. But our main challenge is that it's optional. So who we work with depends on the year, depends on the member of staff, depends on the students, and it means we're not necessarily reaching those students who really, really need it. So that continues to be our challenge. But I think that the awareness in the university is being raised now, post-pandemic, so I think there's a real opportunity for us. And that is how we're doing it at BTU.
Thanks, Maggie. Next slide, please. And that's the interesting bit. So we've got different models here. So Birmingham City have got this voluntary approach whereby some programs come and play and some don't. At Abertay, we've gone big bang, and everybody has to do it. So it's mandatory for all first-year students this year, and so we're delving in the data as we speak, as we move forward. So a very quick rationale for why it's mandatory is that we had an optional module in year 1. I arrived at the university to be set a problem. There's an elective in the first year, we don't like it. We want to replace it with micro-credentials, make it happen. So we did. But what we did then was we chose to actually give it a really specific focus. It's not just about replacing elective. We wanted to build successful academic and social foundations of all our students. And that was the key. So we wanted a coherent set of micro-credentials that would enable that to happen. Because we all know that students leave for a variety of academic reasons, but for a variety of social reasons as well. And so how do we embrace people into the family of Abertay? And so that was the key. So what can we create? Have next slide, please. So what we did was we created these year 1 micro-credentials, of which ABE 101, which is being successful at Abertay. I think you've heard that name somewhere else before. Being successful at a different university is the only mandatory one, and that contains a diagnostic as a formative element halfway through. The summative element is the action plan resulting from the diagnostic. So as a result of doing a diagnostic, which of the other 3 micro-credentials are you going to do? Are you going to do the one around well-being? Are you going to do about research and inquiry skills? Are you going to do the one, ABE 108, Welcome to Community? It's a pun, it's very good. But it's run by the Student Association, so it's fabulous. So actually, it's about how do we embrace you into the student community at university? And so have the Student Association running one of our micro-credentials, I think it's fabulous. So we've got, so the action plan, I say, is the assessment, but they've undertaken this diagnostic within that ABE 101 to identify, and it's, and I'll say this openly, we heavily borrowed what Maggie's work had been at Birmingham City University in terms of shaping what those questions would look like. Can I have next slide, please? So the sections were within it are studying at university. What are your study habits, expectations, independent learning, academic writing and numeracy, digital skills, employability skills, well-being. Those are the types of things that it was asking about in a diagnostic. And much like as Maggie says, you don't get a mark. You get strengths, challenges. Why don't you go and have a look at this? Here's an opportunity for you to build on in this particular area. We do it very early. Actually, students get sent this 2 weeks before they start university. It's online through this ABE 101, which is completely, all our micro-credentials are online, 5 credits per micro-credential. But they get sent this two weeks before the start of term, so that actually, in theory, they could almost have credits before they start at university. But again, it's part of introducing students into the university. And what we hope is that, and again, part of the evaluation we need to better understand is through this engagement with those micro-credentials on well-being or careers or whatever, that we normalise that engagement with the development services at the university. It doesn't become that deficit model of, oh God, I've been sent to the writing people because I can't write or whatever. It becomes a positive. You are expected to engage with these services, or else we wouldn't employ these people. Yeah? So get involved, get engaged, and become better at whatever you're trying to do. Can I have the next slide, please? So again, we don't dare call it a diagnostic because that's scary. So we have the ABBA Discovery tool. Dundee is the city of discovery, isn't it? Thank you. I'm rapidly learning things. So each student as it gets the purpley blue one, which is a personalised feedback report on their strengths and challenges, again automatically generated with lots of links into various other bits and pieces they can do to support their work. The programme leader will get a programme level report, again suggesting that 25% of your students are really worried about their academic writing or don't know how to reference or can't add up, whatever it is, whatever those elements are. But what we also want to do is make sure that that doesn't become a problem for the programme leader. We want to have a solution-focused piece here. So it's about saying, okay, we noticed actually that 25% of students are weak in this particular area from this diagnostic. We suggest you bring in a Maggie or whatever it is to come in and fix that issue from the outset. And again, the great thing is this report is by about week 4 of term 1. So instantly the programme leader will understand what their cohort looks like and where perhaps some of the weaknesses and strengths lie. Again, work in progress. I'd say we haven't nailed this bit yet. I think the student feedback piece we've probably got about right. We need to improve it. Working with programme teams we need to get better at, and we will. Next slide, please. So, again, very early data. This is the term 1 data, but I mean, we're seeing that students are passing the micro-credentials, which is great, because actually, to be honest, the assessments aren't particularly difficult, because actually it's about it's about building confidence in students to study at the university and giving them the foundations and skills to move forward. But there is some interesting stuff in there. So one of the most interesting pieces, the most popular micro-credential at the university, apart from obviously the mandatory one, is planning your future career. So anybody who says first-year students aren't interested in their employability, I might challenge that. The other areas, I say that with a major caveat. The major caveat being, we don't know if that choice has been influenced by the diagnostic we've generated. So what we need to go back is look at how we've asked the questions, how students have responded. Perhaps there's some sort of underlying thing which is pushing more students towards their career element. So we again, work in progress. We need to understand it. But saying that, students don't have to go to the micro-credentials we've suggested. They can go to any one they want, and they've chosen to go to the employability one, which I think is quite interesting. Next slide, please. And skip that one, and skip the next one, and move straight to University of Highlands and Islands. Which is the next one on. Marvellous. And So we've gone for sort of big bang approach at Abate, and I think we're learning a great deal. And I say, and we've gone from the voluntary to the mandatory. So we've got 2 examples of how it's working. Now, one of our other partners in UHI is thinking about it and trying to work out how to do it. So we're going to share some of the challenges. Thank you, Heather.
I think we need to go back one slide. I think we've skipped. Thank you. So I work in the Learning and Teaching Academy in UHI. So we're a central department that supports learning and teaching across the university. I'm also the staff lead for the enhancement theme. So when the call for involvement in collaborative clusters came up, it sparked a personal interest that I had in this topic. So Luke's talked about this as a journey, but actually my journey with this topic predates the cluster in the sense that I started work at UHI looking into student retention and was always interested in taking something like this forward to support retention of students. UHI is a federated institution. We're 13 different academic partners. Through that retention work, I took forward lots of other things, but this was not something that I was able to achieve, but I've always remained interested in it. So when the cluster came up, I was delighted to become involved. We did a very, very small, I've called it a micro pilot. So the way that it's easy to work across 13 academic partners is to find a local champion. So I was the kind of institutional interested person, and I found a local interested person in one of the subject network leaders for science, who said, you know, we have a particular retention issue, and I would like to understand what skills or what challenges our students are facing within that subject network. So those were the motivators for being involved. He put me in touch with one of the program leaders for applied science. It's a higher national certificate. And we ran the micro pilot with the students from that cohort. So I'll talk more about challenges in a minute, but it was great that one of the things that was easy to implement was, because of involvement in the cluster, I had all of the material from Maggie, from Abate, to just deliver to our students. So we really did very little in the way of developing the questions. We just used what was there. I even stole your title and called it the UHI Discovery Tool, but I might have to change that. So things like the report templates for individual and program reports. And then also the fact that I was involved in the enhancement theme meant that I had the time to devote to this work that I perhaps hadn't had previously. Next slide, please. So the micro pilot really was micro. We had 6 student responses, and I generated a report for that program leader. But the response was positive from the program leader. The way that course was structured was that there were fortnightly support sessions that up until that point had just been on topics of the program leader's choosing, but using the report from the diagnostic, he was able to do a few tailored sessions based on the student responses. The challenges are, how do we move on from a micro pilot? And we'll be discussing this in the conversation in a minute. You know, the challenges are probably familiar to many. So we do have stretched resources. We don't necessarily have the right expertise. So I'm finding myself creating a JISC online survey to deliver the questions, when actually what I need is somebody else from the educational development team to write me a nice tool, but they're too busy to do that at the current time. The distributed structure I've mentioned already. So, you know, working in a central unit, how do we get to the different program leaders? We have an institutional commitment to addressing student retention and to delivering a kind of personalised experience for our students. And this is in our strategy. But how do I convince people that this tool is the right way to deliver that output for the strategy? So the journey continues, and there's a couple of potential levers coming up. One is that in our recent enhancement-led institutional review, retention was mentioned again. So there will be a renewed focus on improving student retention, and I think that this work can feed into that positively. The other is a kind of accidental coincidence that there was a project that was called the ATOM project, the Access to Masters project, which was an Erasmus-funded project from around 6 years ago, that created a similar tool for students pre-entry into master's programs. So got students to reflect on their skills, gave them a report, and then really it was to inform the students whether they were ready to apply to that program rather than post-application. But I guess a series of events and availability of funding have resurrected that project, and it's being kind of developed for use beyond that postgrad context. So again, it looks like that might be a potential tool to use for this diagnostic as well as other uses in the university. So I will pause there to hand over to Colin to think about, are these the challenges that you have faced, and what we might do to promote this approach more widely.